Perfect.
Good afternoon again. We are in the third day of the Business Skill Lab. It's a pleasure to have again with us Benedetta Giuliano of Studio Santi. Also because we received a lot of positive feedback from you. So
Nice.
I'm sure that it's a pleasure also for you to have again to spend another afternoon with her. So thank you, Benedetta. The information are the same over the other days. So if you want to chat or to make some questions with Benedetta, please type your question on the chat. We really appreciate your involvement in the lesson. So your questions are really, really, really welcome. Again, some of you asked me for the teaching notes, for the certificate of participation, for the videos. We will provide all these three things at the end of the 5 days on Friday, but only to the people who will fill up the evaluation questionnaire that we will share with you the last day. So don't worry, we will provide you certificate of participation if you need, the teaching notes, so the PowerPoint presentation shared during these 3 and 5 days, and then the videos of the lesson so you can watch again them. But in any case, only what we want to ask you, please fill the form evaluation because it's mandatory for us, because the initiative project is an European project. Last point, I kindly invite you, please don't write on the screen. So Zoom bombing, we are really cautious about that. It's not a joke. It's not a joke. We want to spend with you 2 hours trying to share with you to move to put on the table some experiences, capability, and skill that could be useful for all of you. So please don't write on the screen. And because in other cases we need to stop the sharing of the video to start again. I think it's all. Benedetta, I will manage the access of the new people. Don't worry for that. And
Perfect.
I can give you the floor. So thank you.
Thank you, Katyusha. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Nice to see you again. I hope most of you were present at my session on Monday. So I'll take it from where we left, and then we'll go more into the sides of entrepreneurship. And today I want to talk to you about what sustainable models of entrepreneurship mean, and also what the concept of ambition in economic terms is. So on Monday, we covered two main broad concepts. We looked at institutional voids. So we looked at the missing infrastructure, intermediaries, the rules that entrepreneurs in emerging markets have to build themselves, and how to recognize a void. So we saw that recognizing a void is the starting point of any serious business idea. And then after that, we moved from idea to execution. So we saw the distinction between an idea and a business model. We saw how economies of scale actually work. And we made 2 or 3 actual examples of startups and actual business that entrepreneurs invented. Okay, thank you, Kat, for muting. Okay, and so what are we gonna do today? Today, we are gonna go deeper. We're gonna go 1 or 2 layers deeper. So we're gonna see that building a model is fundamental. You remember we said if we build a business that serves 200 people, is it really a business? No, we need to go dream bigger and to make it bigger. So today we're gonna see that this is not enough. So we're gonna add a few more things that are gonna be useful for you when you will start your own business. And the question now is if and how the scaling that we have in mind can last. So today I want to start with a question. So we start immediately interacting. Look at this slide. And as last time, just um, point your phone at the QR code or join Slido and reply. Let's see what you come up with. My question is, and this is a very like what we call sometimes like the one of the uncomfortable questions. If your goal is to bring electricity to rural households, let me admit, to rural households in Uganda, in Tanzania, in Rwanda, wherever you are, we know that a rural household, more or less average, in East Africa earns between $2 and $3 US dollars per day. So you want to bring electricity there, electricity services. Should they pay for it if this is their income? These are the four answers that I wrote down. Okay, I see you guys are already business minded. You know, this question, I remember when I was studying a few years ago, my professor asked the class a very similar question. I don't remember where was it based, in which country, but it doesn't really matter. And I remember that a lot of people replied, no, this is so unfair because a house that earns $2 to US dollars per day, how can they afford electricity? And also, how can we leave them without electricity? It's really unfair. So I see that 73% said yes, but a subsidized price. And this is really interesting for what we're gonna do after. Um, what I want to say before going ahead is that any answer, and I'm really glad that some replied no, that some replied only if they can afford it, but nobody replied full cost. So I'm gonna go ahead and then I'm gonna leave you the chance to unmute yourself because I want to comment with you. But let me go again, one slide. Okay. So this module is exactly that. It's about understanding, is charity. So for the ones that replied, no, we shouldn't charge. So it means that we should give the electricity for free. For the ones that replied, yes, we should charge them, but we should charge them what they can afford. Or some could reply, yes, we should charge them full price. So our answers are yes, spectrum, no, spectrum. But the answer is yes or no, okay? And both answers are understandable. But, and what's interesting in this part of the module that we're going to see is that both yes and no lead to failure. So this module is about understanding why and about learning to think with more precision about the relationship between financial sustainability, pricing, profit, and social impact. Uh, why charity alone doesn't work? Let's think of the concept of scalability that we saw on Monday. And more deeply, let's think of the Narayana Hospital case. You remember Dr. Shetty. Dr. Shetty asked himself, how can I find my dream? How how can I find how can I fund where can I find the money to implement my solution? The charity option was considered by the entrepreneur in this case, but he dismissed it almost immediately. He didn't even go through the process of asking for subsidized funds. Not because charity is bad, Obviously, charity is good. You help people that cannot afford some services. But the charity option was dismissed by Dr. Shetty because it is not scalable. So we go back to scalability. It is extremely difficult to find enough charitable money to reinvest in a corporate at scale. So if you're lucky, you might find somebody with a very large endowment, someone that loves your idea and is willing to give you free money. Perfect, cool. But then what do you do in phase two? What do you do in 5 years? You're gonna your idea is not gonna able to stand anymore on your business plan. And we go back to the concept of scalability of yesterday. So to be precise, the argument is not that charity is worthless, because this is not at all the concept. But I saw that most of you before replied, yes, we should charge them. The solution was to bring in institutional investors, JP Morgan, AIG, to fund the expansion of his idea while maintaining its social mission and the different pricing model. And this is why he succeeded. Um, Remember this concept, and then we're going to see it more deeply after. Excessive subsidy undermines the long-term impact of energy projects, always. So if you replied before, yes, we should charge them, but less, that's a perfect answer. But in that answer, we will have to look at how much should we charge them then? And how much should we subsidize? Because sometimes it seems pointless because you're like, yeah, come on, it's like these people cannot really afford it. So it doesn't really matter how much you charge, but it actually does. And we're going to see how, and we're going to see why a business model sometimes fails because of the subsidies that are inputted in. There are a few researchers in the recent years that the Business School of Oxford carried out. They studied off-grid energy companies across the whole sub-Saharan Africa. And these researchers found that there is a unique striking pattern between most of the off-grid energy companies in sub-Saharan Africa. The pattern is that companies that were heavily subsidized tended to have a short-term focus and gave less thought to the broader social impact of their work, which is an interesting finding. If companies that had to navigate real financial constraints were pushed to create long-term and sustainable value in more innovative ways, how is it possible that companies that had more money at the beginning, so didn't have to struggle, were not that pushed? Does it make sense for you or it doesn't? Think about it and then we'll take the chance to comment after. One business owner that they interviewed, I remember looking and reading some of these review of these researchers, and I remember reading like that one or a few business owners said that they didn't think that subsidies make sense in their own companies. So they were talking about their own money. They were saying that market-driven business models are 100% needed. And being young entrepreneurs, subsidies didn't make any sense because they were not scalable. They said that for them, it was just about becoming more creative in terms of business models when they were lacking money. So you remember, yeah, on Monday we talked about struggle, and I told you failing is important because if you repeat the same action, the same easy, simple business model, and you fail, second time you fail, third time you fail, fourth time you're not gonna fail because you will understand how to do it. And this is a very similar approach that you guys can apply into this, into the subsidy idea. And this is, I think, a profound insight. Now, another question, just to brainstorm together and to give some food for thought. So, you have a mini grid business that serves a village of 500 households. 3 months after, 80 families stop paying you. Some cannot pay you because they're broke, that the past 3 months they didn't have any income. Others could pay you, but they're seeing that a lot of people are not paying you, so they're like, why would I pay them? What do you do as the business owner of this mini grid? You disconnect all of them because your business has to survive. So you don't pay me, I disconnect you. Or you keep them connected because you believe that energy is essential, and if they didn't earn much, they're gonna pay you when they're gonna earn. You're the business owner, what do you do? Okay, so I see that most of you are replying disconnect them. Does some of you, okay, some keep them connected. Uh, some of you, one person of you that replied disconnect them wants to unmute themselves and tell me in a very brief sentence, why would you disconnect them immediately? What would happen to your business otherwise? Let me go ahead. And then if you guys wanna intervene or comment, you can unmute yourself. We're seeing now the flip side of what we were saying before. So before we said charity alone cannot work. Now we're seeing pure profit cannot work. So what works? Before we you also answering the questions conclude that the answer is simply go commercial and charge. Disconnect who doesn't pay because we need the money. We're business owners, which was the right answer as business owners. But let me give you the other side. Um, the same researchers that I was telling you about in the London School of Economics, Oxford, sorry, School of Economics, researched on willingness to pay for electricity, specifically in rural Kenya and Rwanda. And these researchers tell us something very important, that households are willing to dedicate a significant share of their budget to electricity, but not enough to cover cost-reflective prices at current technology and financing cost. So there was a study in rural Kenya that found out that take-up rates for grid connections were only high when the connection fee was zero. When households were asked to pay even half the actual connection cost, uptake dropped close to zero. Another study in Rwanda found out that households were willing to pay substantial amounts for off-grid solar. But this amount was still less than what it costs still now to provide the service without some form of subsidy or financial engineering. So what do these researchers and studies mean and bring us to think? That a purely commercial model at a current prices and current income levels is not able to reach the households that need energy the most. So we're stuck because if we don't charge them, we're gonna lose. Our business is gonna collapse. But if we charge them based on a simple business model of return on investment, we're gonna lose again. Because even if they pay, the researchers that prove and are based on the most businesses in that area say that you're not going to reach it. You're not going to reach your return on investment. So what do? We have a dilemma. And the dilemma is pure charity or pure commercial. Pure charity is not scalable. Dependency. There's no pressure on innovators. Pure commercial leaves poor income payer out. Prices are too high for lowest income customers. Like this dilemma seems it can be solved. The question, however, is not to choose either or. The question is how to design a model that is financially sustainable and accessible to the people who need the most. And this is what I want you to focus on the length of this last day of workshop together. Look at this slide that I called the spectrum. Imagine a proper, you see like this line, a proper spectrum of colors and that goes from left to right. At one end, we have pure charity. So a donor pays for everything. So imagine a pure donor-funded entity. The beneficiary pays nothing, the donor pays for everything, there is no revenue model, no financial sustainability, no path to independence, nothing. On the other hand, we have the pure commercial. The business charges the full cost reflective price. If you can pay, you get the service. If you don't pay, can't pay, you're out, you're cut out. Between these two poles, there are a lot of different colors, a lot of grays. And it's on these colors that you guys need to focus your attention when you look at your business idea and you need to brainstorm and you need to think how to make it sustainable. How many colors do we have in this spectrum and which color should we pick? You see, I listed three in the middle of the two extreme. We could also do an exercise. You guys at home tonight, you could do an exercise to list 10, 15. There are so many different ones. But what I want you to focus is take one of the colors, take one of the spectrums of these like 4 or 5 different ones. The second, subsidized commercial. These models are models where a company charges customers, but part of the costs are covered by a grant, a concessional loan, a results-based finance mechanism, only a part of it. The subsidy is targeted and time limited and is designed to make the model viable until scale brings the cost down. Scale. When you scale it in your business model, the cost needs to go down. If it doesn't go down, first thing you look at, what is it? The subsidy. And you find a way to reduce it. This is a good color. This can work. But can it work in any business? Of course not. You need to understand which is the color to apply to your business idea. We are seeing here, in this slide that I called 3 pricing problems, the heart of the issue that we are tackling. So pricing is where the charity versus the sustainability debate becomes concrete. And now I walk you through the key concepts and show you how they play out in practice. Let's keep the focus on energy access, on what we are most familiar with. When you are designing a pricing strategy for an energy product or a service in East Africa in energy, you face 3 problems at the same time that are interconnected. And these are the problem. Problem 1, affordability versus cost recovery. Your customers have limited income all the time. It happens all the time. There is no business that has customers that don't have limited income in the energy sector in East Africa. Your costs are real, and the gap between what customers can pay and what it costs to serve them is the challenge, and challenges the energy access finance. Problem number two, upfront cost versus willingness to pay. What we said before, research consistently shows that customers in East Africa are willing to pay and are willing to pay huge amounts if you compare these amounts to their income. Still, not enough to merge or to overcome the upfront cost. Upfront cost remains a major barrier because they can pay. And we were seeing also yesterday with, you remember the PayGo examples of companies we talked about yesterday, sorry, on Monday. Um, a lot of businesses in East Africa worked well because they managed to get their business model on its feet by charging small incomes, not by charging customers a full, huge upfront cost. This is our problem number two. Problem number three, price signals and behaviors. And this is, for me, a really interesting take that I think you guys already caught because of the answers that you were giving me in the questions before. When something is free, people often undervalue it. Think about any example. And we're not talking of basic goods. We're not talking about emergency when there is a flood and you give free households to people. This is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about pure business. If I go out on the streets wherever I live, not necessarily in East Africa, wherever I am now, and I start giving for free a product, this product immediately starts losing its value because people start not appreciating the product anymore. And this is not an abstract economic argument. It is well documented in energy access programs, in researches, but also, I'm sure, in your daily life. Um, Projects that gave away solar lanterns for free found the maintenance was neglected. A lot of pieces were dismantled and sold on the black market. It happens in any market, not only in East Africa, in any market. If something is very cheap or free, you don't really value it anymore. When people pay even a small amount, they behave as customers. And don't think that this is only psychologically, because psychology in economy has a lot of importance. When people believe as customers, not beneficiaries, they demand quality. And when they demand quality, the seller pays attention to the product. And this can only benefit the market. Um, Let me go ahead. Okay. The same example that we were talking about on Monday, Narayana pricing model. So remember the story, Dr. Shetty built a hospital with a specific goal to perform world-class open heart surgery for patients that couldn't afford it. This was in India. You remember that on Monday I told you that what was really cool, smart, and elegant in an economic, elegant way was the pricing approach of Dr. Shetty, because it is one of the most fair in terms of humanity and also one of the most business model efficient. When a patient arrived to Dr. Shetty's hospital, they were asked one question: how much can you pay? And there was no time for bureaucracy checking, running real checks on these people. Dr. Shetty needed to test his idea. So he started having more and more patients that wanted them, his equipe, his employees, to perform an open heart surgery. They were asking them how much you can pay, and they were replying. And they were believing them only based on their immediate reply. Some of them replied full price. I can cover cost of my surgery, plus I can also donate a margin that funds your idea because I love it. I think it can help a lot of people and I want to contribute. Some said, I can pay, but I can pay a break-even price. So I can cover only the costs of my own surgery, but I cannot cover the margin. Others said, I can pay, but I cannot really pay this amount. This is how much I can pay. Others said, I'm sorry, I have no income, I have no money. I can pay zero. All of them were treated. And what did Shetty find out? That between 60 and 65 of his patients paid break even or above. And the surplus managed to fund all the rest. Don't think that this lasted a couple of years and Dr. Shetty was making money. It took a bit, but he saw that not a lot of people were lying. And I remember when I heard this story the first time, my first reaction was, come on, like for sure, everybody to this question replied, oh, I'm sorry, I'm poor, but if you can do this surgery to my heart for free, why would I pay? But it wasn't the case. It wasn't the case. And Dr. Shetty was asked about it. So in one of the interviews, he was asked, didn't you care about people that were lying, or were people not lying? And he said that he took into consideration that people could lie, but he estimated that the liars would have been between 10 and 20% tops. And in this interview, what I found really interesting and touchy, he said that their job was to build a system that is responsive to the ambient level of honesty. And he said that their goal is not to police dishonesty, but to deliver cardiac care. So you remember on Monday I told you he had a dream. He was sure that there was a void to fill and there was a business model to be built. He was sure that people would respect his idea and wouldn't lie to him. And he was right. The attitude of Dr. Shetty, I think, is very remarkable because it reflects a deep understanding not only of humanity, but of what pricing model is for. Remember that pricing, when you put together your business plan and you go to the part of the pricing your product, pricing your service, pricing doesn't need to have the goal to maximize revenue extraction only. Your price needs to prove your business model that you are making the service accessible while keeping the system financially viable. And it might seem the same thing, but if you do this exercise concretely on a business idea, you're going to see that you have a huge spectrum of options. And you need to be good to price your service in the most fair way.
And sorry, Benedetta, from
Yeah,
now you should accept the people. If you
from
can
now
accept the
on,
people from
okay,
now, because I have to leave a few minutes. Thank you.
for sure. Okay, Kat. Now, let me give you three practical pricing tools. So these three tools that you're seeing in the slide are actively used in energy access markets, especially in East Africa. We have the first tool, PayGo, pay as you go. We saw it on Monday. Customers make small daily or weekly payments via mobile money. Um, we saw Box or Mcopa for solar home systems. The key feature is that the customer is building equity in the product by paying monthly. After a defined payment period, they own it. They own the product. It's not a rental, huh? It is an asset purchase structure to match income patterns. This is the pay as you go. You pay until you reach it and you keep it. Tool number two, tariffs. I'm sure most of you that work in energy are familiar with it. We have different rates for different consumption levels or customer categories. So we have residential households pay one rate, small business pay another rate, anchor customers pay other rates. And this mirrors a bit the cross-subsidy logic of the Narayana hospital. Tariffs in East Africa, as you see every day, vary significantly. So we have Tanzania's grid, for example, is around 15 US cents, more or less, and is the lowest in the region. Why? Because it's subsidized by the government, highly subsidized. In Uganda, we have grid tariffs that are around 22 cents, so a little bit more. Kenya, 25 cents. We go even more. Off-grid solutions often cost more per unit, but deliver value that the grid cannot. So reliability, no connection fee, immediate access. Tool number three is results-based finance. So instead of paying for inputs, so instead of building a mini grid, for example, a government or a donor pays for outputs. I don't know if you have ever seen a result-based finance model, but think about a lot of international development organizations like World Bank, Development Finance Institution, NGOs. This is the model that they generally use. Um, it's a funding mechanism where payments are made only after achievement and verification of pre-agreed outcomes and inputs. Let me admit some of the people. Okay, so another question for you. Think about a product or a service in your community that is currently provided by for free by an NGO or government program. Anything that comes to mind. What would change if customers were asked to pay for that service or product, even a small amount? Take your time. You can also write it in the chat after if you think about it. But think about something that you see in your daily life, in your markets that is subsidized. So nobody pays for it because there is an NGO that gives it for free or because government gives it for free. If that thing wasn't free, if that service, that product, what do you think it would change in that? And I want you to really take some time so you can keep this question in your mind. You can type your answer now, but you can also type it after. Good medicine. Medicine is a really good example. And it's also the same what we were saying in the first question, right? Like everybody should have access to medicine. And it's really unfair that a lot of people don't have money to pay for medicines. But if you were a pharmaceutical company, would you give medicine for free? You wouldn't make any money. If you were a government or an NGO, would you subsidize fully medicine? What would happen if all the medicines in rural Uganda or Rwanda were free? Or vice versa? What would happen for worse? before condom in Uganda. Okay, the condom one, I agree. For worse, for sure. For worse, for sure. Okay, very interesting. Okay. Do you want to mute yourself just to briefly talk about the medicine? Because I'm really curious and I want to give you a practical example of what I saw in Europe changing country. But I want to know what you guys think about the medicine because I see medicine mentioned a few times. So please, one of you unmute yourself and can tell me about like what you guys see in the medicine sector and what you think it should change. Okay, I see a comment. Medicine. Paying a small amount could improve responsibility and availability of medicine. But some vulnerable people may not get help because of lack of money. Very true. Very true. So if no one wants to intervene, no comments. Okay, let me just keep reading and then I'll tell you what I have in mind. Uh, okay. So if something was free until today and from tomorrow it becomes chargeable, so it costs money, some of you replied, customers will automatically stop using the product. This is a huge risk. And we go back to what you guys were saying on Monday about uh, advocacy and education. There are some products that need to be taught to be understood by the public. But think about medicine, think about electricity. Medicine maybe is the best example. How could you stop using it? If you had even a small amount of money, you would pay for it if you believe in medicine, but any kind of medicine. Let's see, in Tanzania, when people are told to pay for things, they immediately start saying that the government has started taking their money. That's very true. That's very true. And we go back to education. Let me give you this personal experience so you can think about it. So I come from Italy, and in Italy, healthcare is free. So it means that taxes are very high, but anyone can access to any hospital and gets free treatment. You don't have to pay. While there are countries like Switzerland, that is very close to Italy, or the United States, where you need to have a health insurance, a private health insurance, to access to any cure. So you cannot show up to a hospital and get a treatment. You need to pay a fixed amount every year to a private company to get treated, private health insurance. So when I started traveling abroad and I saw the differences, I was shocked because I come from a country that treats you and cures you without taking any money. Then I moved to Northern Europe, to the Netherlands. And I saw something that made me think a lot, which is the healthcare system in the Netherlands work asking you for a health insurance. So even if it's public, it claims to be public, you need to pay health insurance. Fine. It's not a huge amount of money and the government helps you. So any people makes it. But since everything is subsidized by the government, because the health insurance that you pay is very, very small, so the rest is subsidized by the government, even the medicines. To access to those medicines, you have to really prove it. You cannot show up to a pharmacy and buy a drug. You need to have a few papers, and sometimes it requires you a long time because the government needs to be sure that the money that they're spending are for real causes. And the people in the Netherlands accept it and are really okay with that. For me, for example, the idea that treating my kids when they are sick is linked to waiting for months until I get the papers from my insurance to get the medicines, I'd rather pay from my pocket. So I would pay. And I think that this is, at least in my case, in my personal experience, this was a really interesting way to look at the difference of countries in Europe. So, in a place that you might think, in a continent, you might think, okay, everything works the same. Not really. And also made me think a lot of, okay, I'm a consumer, so I'm complaining here, but what would I do if I was the government? Is the Italy government right in putting all the taxpayers' money into healthcare and giving everything for free? Or is the Netherlands government better in doing it because they are half subsidizing it? And also, they are making it very hard for people to get medicines. This is a dilemma. I don't know what you guys think, but I don't know what to reply. I'm torn. I'm reading a bit of your answers. We have seen in many incidences where people resort to traditional or herbal remedies for treatment when they could not afford medical costs. That is really true. And we see it in Europe as well. We see exactly the same trend. So, as entrepreneurs, if we wanted to create an enterprise, a business in the medicine sector, what are the voids? What are the missing infrastructure? What are the prices? What is the pricing structure? This could be a, a challenging, interesting exercise for you to do. And this brings us to this next slide, where there is the concept, we touched it briefly, especially you in your answers, you touched it, the concept of blended finance. And this concept has become the dominant approach to finance energy, any kind of energy access in Africa. So blended finance is the most important financial innovation for sure in the development sector in the last decade. It was also abused most of the times, but it was very innovative. If you work in energy, for sure you know about it and you've encountered it many, many times. What is it? Blended finance combines concessional capital, so grants, subsidies, subsidized loans, guarantees from development finance institutions, gifts, free checks, free money, any of it, with commercial capital from private investors. So that's why it's called blended, because it's a mix. You put it in a blender, you mix it, and you come up with the business plan. So the idea in blended finance is to use a relatively small amount of public or philanthropic NGO money to reduce the risk profile of a project, enough to make it attractive to commercial investors who would otherwise run away. Think of it as a financial engineering that makes good projects bankable. It's exactly the same. Concrete example, practical case. In a $20 $20 million, sorry, in a $20 million solar electrification initiative across East Africa. A broad example. We have 45% grant component that was used to de-risk the project, reducing effectively the required commercial returns from 20% down to between 8 and 10%. The grant absorbed early stage development risks and currency fluctuations, making the remaining 55% attractive to commercial investors. And this made obviously predictable returns. In a traditional financing structure, the same project, the same $20 million solar project, might require electricity tariff of 12 or 15 cents per kilowatt hour to generate acceptable returns, so minimal returns. With blended finance, so with the grant components, the same project is able to offer power at 8 or 10 cents per kilowatt hour. And this difference allows thousands more families to afford electricity. So here, I don't think we can debate. It's awesome. It's a really smart solution. And this is the simple mechanism of blended finance. Public money takes the first loss. So you have to imagine getting money from a tender of the UN, from an NGO, from government, and losing this money. These money are not gonna bring any money. You lose them. This is the first loss. This, however, reduces the cost of capital because you don't spread this loss on your business model. You know you're gonna lose this. You take the money from the government, you put the loss aside, and now you can start selling your product, selling your service, making the project viable. And why does this matter for you as entrepreneurs? Because blended finance is not something that happens only at this level, so at the level of 20 million USD. It operates across the entire energy access ecosystem. It applies to small solar home system. It applies to large mini grid developers, small mini grid developers, anyone will have a benefit in their business plan if they manage to create a blended finance model. Only the private sector, remember this, as the mean to combine innovative technology and accessible financing mechanism. Because the private sector needs to scale their solutions. And in our case, us as entrepreneurs, we need to scale our energy solutions in the emerging markets we work in. But we know that due to constraints imposed by the need to make a profit, because we said it, we need to make money, otherwise it's not a business. While operating in low-income countries and with low-income customers, us in the private sector, being the private sector, cannot solve this issue alone. There is no magic formula that we can make our customers more rich. They're gonna be poor as we see them now. So the only way to ensure equitable progress and to ensure that our business plan works is through partnerships between public and private sector. And I am sure that this acronym of PPP, you know, and you've looked at it so many times. So what's PPP? PPP is a public-private partnership and is the concept that shows you, as in this slide, what the public and concessional capital does. So what's their space and what's the space of the private capital? So look a bit like a few seconds at this slide. We see public and concessional capital that absorbs early stage risk. We see subsidies connection cost for the poorest. We see that they help building the enabling environment. And the private capital, we just said it. What does it do? Sorry, guys, let me mute you. Remember to mute yourself, please. I just hear a bit of noise. Um, but even looking at this tool, even if it seems a very easy concept, blended finance, be careful because it is not the cure for an unviable business model. Your business model need to work anyway. You need to ask for a little help from blending finance. It cannot be built on grants. It cannot be built on, okay, we're gonna get this money from the government because it won't survive. It could last a few years, but it's not gonna be business. It's just gonna be a nice pilot project, a nice experiment you did. Um, so what is the pathway to commercial viability? How do you have a commercially viable product? How do you have a commercially viable service? Let's carry these three principles from what we just said. Um, Three principles that I think you can also alone write down after this session, but let's repeat them together. First, which is very important, and we started with it, charity alone is not a financial model. It is a tool. Sometimes very important because there is the human part, but it cannot substitute the financial sustainability of your business model. Second principle, charging is not exploiting the poor. Remember that your pricing structure in your business model is what is the fundamental base of where your business is going to stand. If there's no real and concrete pricing structure, your business is going to collapse. Your house is going to collapse. The question is not whether to charge, because the answer is always yes, you have to charge. Nothing for free. Little amount, little amount. Nothing for free. And if it is for free, think about it thoroughly and think, are we sure? Shouldn't we charge a little small amount just to make people more conscious and more aware of what they're using or the products that they're using? Third principle, the best models are hybrid, always. They use a mix. They are really aware of the mix that they're using, and they do not push too much on the subsidized part. These are our three principles from this first part of our last session. I'm gonna give you a few minutes and then we are gonna move into the second part of module 3. So I'm gonna see you now in Italy is 4:10. I'm gonna see you at 4:15 and we'll keep going with the last session. But please write in the chat any thoughts. I'm really enjoying reading your comments and it gives me also a lot of things to think about when I explain these concepts. So I'll see you in a little bit.
Vedi?
Hi, everyone. I'm back. Kat, can you still see my presentation? Just checking.
Yes,
Perfect.
evolution, transferability, ambition is
Perfect.
the slide I can see.
Yes. All right. So, let me move the cursor. Okay. So, in this second part, our last, unfortunately, um, we will recap a little bit what we have seen during these two sessions together. So if I wanted to just go very smoothly through it, now after Monday and this half part of today, you can identify institutional voids, understand the importance of scale and what a real business model looks like, and you know the difference between charity and financial sustainability. Now we are gonna zoom out a little bit these concepts, because what we need to understand is that a business model is not a finished product. And be careful on that because there are a lot of young, excited entrepreneurs that have an idea. They are sure that they are able to succeed in it. And what they learn too late is that a business model always evolves. It cannot stay the same as the day zero because as your idea might change and probably will change, everything around it changes. So the business model is not a finished product. Imagine it as a living system that evolves, that changes, and you have to change with it. There is also something else that I want you to take out from this session. Um, and I already told you this yesterday. You see this slide. So I'm zooming out. I'm zooming out on two very important concepts. The business model that is not a finished product, and also what we said yesterday in our last slides, that a model that works in one place rarely transplants unchanged to another place. If you do it, likely it's not going to work. And we're going to zoom out on these two concepts so that you can think more about it and it can give you a bit more food for thoughts. Um, I want to tell you another story. Um, and this story is actually gonna bring us to another story, and you'll see why they're interconnected. So it was more or less 2013, 2014. And a research team went to this big religious festival in India that is called the Kumbh Mela. At this religious festival, generally, roughly, there are 100 million people over 55 days. So think about that scale for a moment. It's really one of the largest planned gathering of human beings on Earth. And a temporary city is built only for that festival. So we have all these people in this specific time frame, like 55 days, concentrated in one place. And then, obviously, this is a huge city that they build on purpose for this festival. So these people enter, access it, and then just enjoy the festival. Obviously, I imagine that in your mind already a lot of questions are coming, like how can this be possible? There's so many issues that can come, and this is exactly this exercise we need to do now. So the government of India in 2013, invited an external research team to analyze specifically the health challenges that this festival had. There were, sorry, I keep unmuting. Sorry. There were 14 medical clinics only in this town, serving tens of millions of people. Doctors seeing, let's say, 600 patients in an 8-hour shift, about a patient per minute. The doctors were writing notes. So imagine them scribbling in paper registers, one patient per minute. Imagine the chaos there was there. And obviously, the government of India was, after many years of doing that, and people were more and more and more every year, called this external research company, telling them, come over, come help us find a solution for the health challenges we have here. There was no way to see patterns across these 14 medical clinics that were there. So they're like, imagine an epidemic starting in one little area, no one would know about it. So they had an issue even of communication before any medical issues would arise. So these researchers decided to build a real-time disease surveillance system. Something that would tell the health authorities what was happening across these 14 clinics simultaneously. So a system where they could immediately inform. Um, so they could respond before a minor outbreak becomes a disaster. This was their first idea. But from this idea, what was their first solution? They did not have time or any resource to build an app. Because, of course, nowadays, what we all probably would think is, come on, it's easy to communicate to someone on the other side of town. I use my phone or I use the app of this festival. They had no time, they had no money, they had no resources. They couldn't build an app. And they even didn't know if it would work. What they did instead, they took the existing paper registers where all these doctors were scribbling on and drew grid lines, like we do in Excel now. They do it by hand. So they started putting an order manually on these registers the doctor were using. So it seems a very, very simple idea. So they started putting columns: age of patients, gender, previous diseases, what is happening, chief compliant. So suddenly, the information was readable and structured. So they were instructing doctors to report on these patients in that exact way, all of them. Then what did they do? They hired a bunch of medical students to transcribe these registers into tablets twice a day. These tablets, so internet, were synchronized to a cloud database via a mobile hotspot. Within 12 hours, the authorities had a visual dashboard of disease patterns across all 14 clinics in this Kummela festival. What happened? It worked perfectly. It was the first time, imagine it was 2013, recent. This festival has been going for years. For the first time, the Kummela festival and the Kummela authorities could see a spike in respiratory cases on a busy day. They could respond in real time because they could anticipate it and they could map it. This is pure entrepreneurship. And this is entrepreneurship in constrained conditions. When you have no time, you have no resources, you have a limited space, you have basically no customer because your customer in that case was the government. So it was like a pure emergency. And you cannot wait in this case for perfect infrastructure. Most of the infrastructures were missing. You remember the missing infrastructure of Monday. It was a pure emergency. So this external research company, they had to work with what existed at that time and add the thinnest possible layer of new intervention because they need to act quickly. And the government that was their client wanted to see immediate results. Very cool case, in my opinion. That brings us to another case, a completely different festival, also happening in India, but quite smaller, that it's linked to our case one before, because this is the version two. Let's see why. Let's see how. So the government of India invited the same team. They liked the way they were working. But they invited them to this smaller festival called Nashik. And this time they didn't hire them as external outside researcher. They hired them as part of the core health infrastructure of the government. So they were their employees. They hired them. And in this case, in case two, as you see from the slide, instead of 14 clinics, the challenge was bigger. There were 50 clinics. The students transcription model was no longer viable at that scale. There were too many clinics. How many students would they have to hire? Too many. And the system had to evolve. So our research team had a new um, struggle, a new challenge. What did they do? They redesigned the tool entirely. So instead of medical students transcribing from paper from doctors and putting them into computers, into portable tablets, the doctors themselves entered the data directly on computers. So they skipped a passage. They learned because they were doing it again. So doing it again made them more confident and they were quicker. So this required a completely different user interface. One, intuitive enough to learn in under 1 hour on the first day of the festival. There were no training session for doctors, no manuals, no one really checking if these tablets were working, if doctors were able to do it. Same as in the other festival. They need to be quick and they needed also to make mistakes. So what did they do? They tested every tap and every swipe. They involved frontline doctors in designing the interface. And critically, they made sure the doctors could see their own data in real time. So if there was something to correct, the doctors would go immediately to correct it. These data were not sent immediately to a general system. They stayed in doctors' portals, in doctors' tablets. Um, what was the result? 100% compliance across 100 providers. 35,000 patients encounters logged in 12 days. It was almost automating itself, the system. So what changed? What is the thing that changed between our case one and our case two? First, it changed who operated the system. No more students, doctors. So there was no passage. How data entered the system. Before was from transcription to computer. Now it was directly, quicker, smarter. It changed the scale of deployment. We had 14 clinics. It was also easy to see if it was working. Now we had more than double, 4 times. And also it changed the relationship to the client from the research team. They were integrated. They were not paid by the government to do only that, to do a peripheral research. They were part of the team. They felt it more personal. They had to perform. It was not like an adventure or, like, okay, this client is paying me for this assignment. Let's see. It was their project. They had to succeed. And this is also, again, a little bit of psychology, a huge link to the economics. Sorry, I need to go back. So this is what evolution looks like for a business model. The core value stayed constant. Everything else was redesigned based on what the first version taught them, based on the mistakes that they made. So the key question is, and we see it at the bottom of the slide, what will version 2 look like and what must version 1 teach you? And this is, now we know the story, so we know the answer. But every time you have a business idea and you write it down, immediately think of the version 2 of this idea. And this is the concept of the beginning of this second part of the module. Your business model is a changing concept, is not fixed. Change it, because this version of your product, your business model, your service is not what it will be in a few years. You will have many versions of it. So ask yourself immediately, okay, this is a great idea, but how would version 2, will version 2 and would version 2 look like? This is, I think, in my opinion, a great challenge and exercise to do when you have to apply to your own model. And also, if you cannot answer the question, it means that you haven't thought hard enough about your own model if you don't think there can be a version two. So spend more time thinking about it before implementing it. And also, I wanted to ask you this question. Mm, don't think we said that this the government of India called this company just to focus on health. So take health aside. It has nothing to do with health. Think of these festivals where a lot of people are gathered in one place. They have an entrance, they have an exit, but then there is a town of hundred thousands of people. What do you think is the biggest disaster that can happen, that happens when we have 100 million people in one festival? No health related, something else. It is not health related, so no disease, no. Okay, pollution, limited or no resources that could sustain all of them. No, let's say that this festival is very well equipped. There's food, there's water. Suffocating, true. There is something more simple. More simple. Imagine going to an event where there are an insane amount of people and you go with your family. What what is a fear? Let's imagine you go with your kids. What's your fear? What can happen? Close, close. Congestion, infrastructure collapse for sure, but even more simple, more simple. Just, yes. I don't know who said it, but exactly that. Losing people. Yes. That's the right answer. And now let's go into it. Missing people. Exactly. Exactly. You got it, guys. Okay. Okay. Let's go. Let's go into this. And we go through another story that I also enjoy, which is a super simple need, the super simple void. But until then, nobody really solved it. Same festival, Kumbh, the one of before. One of the biggest disasters at gathering 100 million people in Kumbh is people getting lost. Imagine elderly pilgrims, super young kids, in crowds of millions with no landmarks, no phone, no internet, no shared language because in India, there are a lot of languages that people speak. They don't share only one. This is a proper issue because this festival also lasts many days. What is the solution? Yellow balloon. Someone came up with a very smart intuition that was to build giant helium balloons floating above specific designated points that they were called the lost and found around the festival grounds. So everyone on the ground was able to look at the sky, and they could see where these giant balloons, yellow balloons, were. And if they were lost, if they got lost, their only mission was to reach the point under the balloon. Really very, very easy. These people made a business out of it. And this business was find the yellow balloon. It worked. It worked very, very well. Most lost people were reunited with their families within 48 hours, 28 hours, which, according to the scale of the festival, is not really a lot. Because imagine, like, maybe the balloon is very far from you, from your families, but 48 hours was a really incredible um, goal that they reached. Then um, a well-meaning entrepreneur came along in 2000, so same time of the example we were saying before. And this entrepreneur um, noticed that at that time, compared to the previous festivals, most of the attendees had phones, could afford a phone. So he said, okay, I think the solution is building an app. Building an app where everyone that was attending the festival could sign in, upload their photo, describe themselves, connecting to the families, and let families search for you. For this entrepreneur, it seems smart, modern, logical, and he also managed to gather a bunch of funds because there were people backing them up. What happened compared to the yellow balloon? Failed. This business idea failed. Why? Why do you think it failed? You can write it in the chat, you can think about it, you don't have to unmute yourself. But why? It seemed so smart. Why do we still need to rely on these yellow balloons? We have a phone. The people who most needed to be found, who most needed the balloon, were unfamiliar with smartphones. It was 2013. Maybe now it's a bit different. We don't know because we don't know the landscape there. Elderly, poor, super young kids. They don't have a phone. They're not familiar with apps. For them, a phone was for calling someone whose number you already knew. They didn't know how to sign in an app and then look for your family, and then it was too complicated. Nobody was downloading it. Nobody used it in the festival. So, what is our honest reflection that we can make? Uh, if any of us had been sitting somewhere in a design lab with this entrepreneur, we would have built the same app. Most of us, I'm pretty sure, would have been like, this is smart. Yeah, of course we need to build an app. But numbers prove us that we all would have been wrong. So what is the lesson here? The lesson is not that technology doesn't work. Of course, technology works, and probably apps will substitute us in a lot of things. But the lesson here is that the existence of technology is not sufficient, is not enough. The social and cultural conditions that allow us to succeed in our business, that allow our ideas to break even and start making money, are very strictly connected to it. So if we need to build a business plan, technology is important, but the same amount of importance we need to put it on social and cultural conditions, because these conditions will allow us to perform, will allow our business model to really prove that we have a return on our investment. Um, I want to draw one more lesson from the Kumela Festival before we move to our East Africa cases, so our cases more close to home. And this lesson that I think we all need to take from this example, from this Indian festival, um, is about the relationship between the state, so the government, the private sector, and entrepreneurship. Think about the role that the Indian government played and the impossible challenge that they faced. They had 100 million people gathering in 55 days, um, and they need to organize infrastructure, organize sanitation, avoid that people would die, security, food supply, water supply, anything. And they didn't have a lot of infrastructure, like proper infrastructure. So what did the government do? It didn't try to do all of it. It created the conditions, the minimal viable infrastructure, and then enabled everyone else to operate. So the Indian government called an external private company. Then they hired them, but they called them externally because they knew that they didn't have the capabilities to do it, to run a solution in the health. They purchased the yellow balloons. They didn't say, oh, it's all on us. We're going to solve all of it because they knew that they couldn't. It is not feasible for any government with a festival of that scale. But what do we see in most of our countries, of the countries we operate? That most governments overpromise and underdeliver because it happens all the time. If you overpromise, for sure you're not going to deliver all of it. And most of the governments we deal with commit to do everything and fail. So why does this matter for our energy cases in East Africa? It matters because the most successful electrification programs that we can see, that we can take as an example in Rwanda, in Kenya, in Tanzania, in Uganda, follow the same logic. And we were looking at it on Monday. The government's job is not to build every mini grid. They couldn't, they fail. What is their job? Is to create a regulatory framework clear enough that investors can commit. Is to provide results-based subsidies that make projects viable without distorting the market. Is to map potential sites and share data with developers. This is their goal. This is what they should do. And when they do it, the smartest enterprises rise. When Rwanda did it deliberately, we saw it yesterday, creating a clear mini grid licensing framework, partnering with companies like Box. Private investments followed rapidly, and Box took over the market, started rising, started creating those bridges you remember on Monday, the bridges also for other entrepreneurs. This was thanks to the government. And on Monday, you guys wrote a lot of comments about it. A lot of you were very insisting on the fact that governments play a huge role in entrepreneurship in East Africa. And this not only proves what you were saying, but also helps you understanding that yes, the governments have a huge role, but there are spaces where you can fit in. Do not expect the governments to do everything. If you can step in, do it. If the government is smart enough, they're gonna leave spaces for private people, private companies to step in, help them, because they don't have all the capabilities. And if you expect the government to help you with everything, no business is gonna succeed. There is no example that shows this. So it's, and this is a really important lesson learned from the Indian case that we saw before. Okay. I told you that this second part of this module would be on zooming out, about zooming out concepts that we talked about in module number 1 on Monday. And this is the second zoom out, the transferability. Um, on Monday, we ended our session with a question. When you look at your own idea, which elements of this idea are universal and which elements are context specific? Meaning, which elements can I bring with me when I want to scale up in a different country, in a different environment? And what elements I need to leave behind because they wouldn't work? That question captures the concept of transferability. And today we will try to answer to it properly. So the short version of what we already saw yesterday on Monday is that Box and Sun Culture, the two companies that I brought as examples, did not copy their models into new countries. They rebuilt them, but they kept their principle. The execution was what they fully rebuilt. What we add today is the how. How did they do it? How did Box and Sun Culture rebuild and not copy their model? Transferability means being able to articulate why your model works. So that's the first thing. If you can write down the mechanism clearly, you can transfer it. If you can only describe your product, describe your service, you will fail. So when you have your idea, before starting your business, focus on the mechanism. Focus on why. Why does your company work? Why will this work? Not what are you selling? Okay, I understand the product, but why will this product work? Try to elaborate on that because that is exactly the heart of your company that you will have to transfer when you scale your idea. We go back. We go back to an example that we made in the past slides because I think it would be easy for you to think through, and also because I think it's a really interesting space. Pay-go journey, pay as you go, can be considered the most transferred idea in Africa energy companies, Africa energy business. Let's look at this slide. What do we see? We are talking still, obviously, about transferability. And in this case, we're talking about the transferability of the mechanism of the pay as you go. How did it start? You see it in the left part, so origin. And from the origin, you see how the same mechanism changed throughout the years with completely different companies, products, and services. But the principle stayed the same. So that's exactly what I want to capture, how I want to capture the transferability concept. Look at this. So, origin of the pay-go journey. Mobile telecoms. In the late 90s, what do we see? We see coming and started like taking the market, prepaid airtime, so small frequent payments instead of monthly contracts. This was a proper financial innovation, not a technical innovation, because phone and networks were already there, were not built for this purpose, were unchanged. but the payment structure was new. How did it transfer into 2010? Different environment, off-grid solar. Box and Copa, we mentioned it yesterday. These companies applied the same logic, so transferred the same principle to solar home system. The new ingredient was a GSM chip that disables the unit on non-payment. So enforcement without courts or credit bureaus. You don't pay, I'm gonna cut you out. You're not into the system anymore. Same principle transferred to another time, another scenario, 2015, 2020. What happens? An interesting company, we saw it on Monday, Sun Culture. Sun Culture applies PayGo to irrigation pumps. Same principle, completely redesigned schedule. Farmers, their income is seasonal, not weekly. We saw this old story yesterday. Sun Culture was able to take the principle of pay as you go and apply it, so completely changing what was around the mechanism to farmers and their irrigation problems. You can apply this to the other two transfer. Box selling smartphones, Copa selling electric motorcycles to Boda Boda riders in Kenya. They knew, they understood the concept, and they kept learning the new markets, changing the product, keeping the mechanism. The mechanism doesn't change. The product, the service, the distribution are rebuilt every time. If you think your idea is applicable in other 4 neighboring countries, don't stay stuck on the specific product because your idea is not the product you're selling. Remember, your idea is why your business model is gonna succeed. Why? Why is your concept gonna work? What does this teach us about transfer? And before going to this question, last question that I want to ask you, we just learned an important lesson. Copying the mechanism is the key to rebuild the application. Now, take your time, some minutes, and look at this screen. Look at the screen and scan the QR code. So, a little story, little example. A Nairobi-based founder runs a PayGo solar business in Kenya, and she's successful. She decides to launch the same in northern Uganda using the exact same playbook. Same hardware, same 24 months payment plan, same weekly mobile money installments, same field agent model. She waits 6 months, looks at the results, and she sees that default rates are 3 times higher than in Kenya, and growth has stalled. She's not growing. She's doing exactly the same. Why is she not growing? What did she get wrong? Take your time and select the question, the answer or answers that you think are more appropriate to describe what she did because she failed. Sorry, I need to go back. Mm. So, what did she get wrong? What was wrong in what she did? She copied the product instead of rebuilding the mechanism. She assumed mobile money usage and customer income patterns were the same as in Kenya. She should have waited longer than 6 months before judging the results. Why 6 months? She should have charged a higher price to cover the higher risk. That's why she lost money. Feel also free to unmute yourself if you want to add something or if you want to explain to me why you answered that way. This is our last part of the session, so feel free to unmute yourself if you want, or write in the chat and I'll interact with you. So let me comment on your answers. Most of you answered the first. Also in the chat, I'm seeing that a lot of people saying A. Um, you're saying that she made a mistake because she copied the product instead of rebuilding the mechanism. Perfect. That's a correct answer. She failed on the transferability. A lot of you also said that she assumed mobile money usage and customer income patterns were the same as in Kenya, and it was wrong. This is also true. This is the enabling condition point because mobile money penetration and income regularity differ across countries and markets. So you are both right to have replied the first two answers. The third is what we call a distractor. Because yes, but no, like patience is not the issue. Patience. If we have a full stallment, if we are completely stuck and we see that the business model is not going, is not moving forward, it's not a matter of waiting. We should act. Sometimes could be, but in this case, we know that she completely replicated the model. You guys that are in Uganda know that the market is different from Kenya. In some aspects, they can be a little bit similar, but it's different. And the last option, she should have charged a higher price, is a bit of a trap answer because, yes, it sounds a bit business savvy, but it doubles down on the same mistake because it's treating it as a pricing problem instead of a transfer problem. We still need to fix the transfer, then we'll fix the pricing. Let's focus on the first two. First two answers really show what we learned in the past slides. So very well done. We are at the end of our session. I want to share with you these last slides, couple of slides. This one, I called it entrepreneurial ambition because when people talk about ambition in entrepreneurship, they generally mean scale. So if someone asks you, okay, what's the ambition of this idea? You immediately, instinctively want to answer, oh, I want to bring this to 46 countries. And this for you is, I'm ambitious. My idea is ambitious. Ambition is not scale. The number of customers, the size of the company, the amount of money raised, they're all singular important elements. And they matter. Scale matters. We said it. It's without scale, we're going nowhere. But the entrepreneurs who I most respect and that really made it are not ambitious about the size. They reach the size, but they're not ambitious about it. It's not their first priority. They are ambitious about the problem that they are solving. Um, Dr. Shetty, in our workshop of these past 2 days, is for me the biggest example in this. What was his ambition? His ambition was not the amount of hospitals he could build or the amount of clients or customers he could have. His ambition was to treat every person in the world who needs tertiary medical care for $1 a day. It was a moonshot, and of course, don't think that he made it the day after. He's probably very far from his big goal, but that was his ambition, and that's why he, he did it, because he had a vision. And even if he was failing over and over and over, and he was learning, but he was also failing, he kept his ambition. And the ambition is and scale are two completely different concepts. It's not about the size of his hospital. It is about the problem he was solving. The problem of Dr. Shetty is his ambition, is the ambition. If you see these 3 points that I put in the slide, are I think 3 milestones that every successful entrepreneur managed to reach and understood. Success is defined by the problem, not the product. Your success condition is not, oh, we sold 10,000 solar home systems. We're super successful. No. It is the households we served no longer spend money on kerosene. Their children study after dark. They don't intoxicate themselves. And their parents that have small businesses can operate in the evening. That is success. Then you need to sell 10,000 and you need to sell more because you need to make money. But that is not your success. That is the engine of your business model, of your idea. The second milestone is you stay committed to the hardest customers. The easiest market to serve is always the wealthiest. Rich people, they're going to buy your product. I don't see any issue in here. Most accessible, most educated. You don't need to educate them. You don't need to do the advocacy we were talking about on Monday. But ambitious entrepreneurs design for any market and design for the edges, the most remote, the least wealthy, the most underserved. Why? Because they have a problem to solve. If there wasn't a problem to solve, they wouldn't be doing it. And last one, think in decades, not funding cycles. Remember the Kumela festival? It has been running for hundreds of years, centuries. Box was funded in 2010 and is still refining its model. It's not about this year, decades. we said, I told you before, think of version 2, think of version 10. That is how and why you're challenging your ambition. And this is very important. So remember that also your ambition cannot be written in a pitch deck. If you want to get funds, you need to prove that your model works. You're going to bring a lot of numbers. Keep your ambition somewhere in your heart, in your mind, in some pieces of paper, write it on your post-it, write it every time that you wake up, write it somewhere that you can read it every day. Because if you lose the focus, there's no money to be made, there is no dream to be achieved, there is nothing. Keep the ambition in your mind and dream big, but also do your math. All of it together. That's the last slide and how I am ending my session and my workshop with you. This is the question that I think every entrepreneur should be able to answer. Why this problem and why you? Everything else we have studied this week, voids, scale, transferability, sustainability, blended finance, evolution, all of that is in service of this single question and of its answer. The frameworks are the tools. The answer to why this problem and why you is the reason to pick them up and to keep working and to fail and to keep learning. Take the week on with you, take the month, anytime you need. Sit with this question. And when you find your answer, build around it the model that can work, that is worth it, and that your ambition deserves. There, you're gonna make it. Thank you so much, everyone. I really hope you liked it and that this will give you some inspiration to think and to work on your ideas and to work on your businesses. These are my contacts. This is my name. You can add me on LinkedIn. You can write in the chat. This presentation at the end of the Business Skill Lab will be circulated. And I am very looking forward to seeing your businesses succeed because I'm sure they will. And have a great rest of your day.
So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Benedetta, for your precious presentation. I want to take just a few seconds to invite you again tomorrow. And we will have again Flavio of Hyderabad for a presentation on the practical approach in his business, just to show you several examples how to make business in energy. And thank you, Benedetta. Thank you really a lot. I hope to have the opportunity to organize with you other training session in the framework of Nishati project. And for the others, see you tomorrow in the afternoon, same link, same time, and hope to meet again. So many people connected. So thank you. Thank you a lot.
Thank you, everyone.